Welcome to another episode of F It, I've Got a Brain Injury. My name's Ken, and I'm here with Jesse.
The idea of this podcast was to have a podcast for people with brain injuries, for people with family members who have brain injuries, for people who want to learn more about brain injuries. And I wanted to let it be known that me and Ken, the hosts, have brain injuries. So I apologize for my voice. And I also apologize for Ken's face. Thank God you can't see it. He has a face for radio.
I have a face that would make a freight train take a dirt road.
So sit back, relax, grab some popcorn, and enjoy. Thank you, Kim, for coming today and talking to us all about the guardianships and the way it can help a CBI survivor.
So, like I was saying with you, Jesse, your mother has to document everything.
Is she the trustee or is she a representative payee for Social Security? Or is she a guardian?
The question to you, what's the difference between that?
Actually, really good questions. So sometimes some parents are actually dealing with 3 different types of money, and in each case they have a different name, but they've got to document it differently. So there are some folks who have trustees of a trust, and when you're wearing your trust hat or your trustee hat, you're only dealing with money that's in the trust. And then sometimes people have a parent or another loved one act as their representative payee, and they're going to get the Social Security money. And the Social Security money is then used for basically for housing, for food, and they have to report to the Social Security Administration once a year.
Yeah, I think my mother is a payee.
Yep. There's also one other category called a guardian. And a guardian is if someone's gone to court to say, my child had a brain injury and they can't handle these certain decisions. They can't make their healthcare decisions. They can't manage their own funds, and they need a legal guardian to manage their money.
Right.
Is that what they did to Britney Spears?
Yeah, they did a conservatorship for Britney Spears.
Yes.
Yep. So some states call it conservatorship. Some states call it guardianship. In New York, there's different kinds of guardianships, but we call them a guardianship. And so if someone is acting as guardian, they're managing almost like a different pool of money. It was money that was already in somebody's name, or maybe an inheritance, or a smaller amount. But whatever they're managing as the guardian, they have to report every penny of that in an accounting every year to the guardianship court. So when you were talking earlier about receipts, there's a lot of documenting, there's a lot of receipts, but the person with the disability almost never needs to be the person managing that. It's the trustee or a guardian or the representative payee.
Ooh. Now, if you have a credit card, can the trustee pay for that, all of that stuff? Like for me, I'd rather have the credit card pay for a lot of this stuff so I can get more points or miles. And is that allowed? Because right now it all goes to my mother. She takes care of all of it.
Is it allowed? Yes. It's more just almost more of a financial planner or a budgeting kind of thing. Because you have some money in your name, and then there's some money in the trust.
Right.
So whether you can put whatever you want on the credit card. And if you've got a credit card like that has miles, you might pay for some of the bill, and the trust might pay for some of the bill, but it's all the same credit card.
Right, yep. Okay.
So that's really more of a shuffling to see what makes sense in terms of who should be paying for some of the money or paying for some of the bills.
And I do know that I just got something from Social Security that says they need to know a lot more than they ever have. All the medications I'm on, all my doctors, all my not my lawyers. they need to know everything, more or less. That's never happened before. I think the nurses used to do that at one time.
Do you have a guess as to why they were asking that?
I think it's to make sure people are using the money correctly and should be on Medicaid.
So when you get those letters from Social Security, they have an obligation to check in and double check every couple of years to make sure someone still has a disability.
Yep, that's what.
So sometimes you have to do a disability sort of recertification. And if you have, if you're a senior and you've got like dementia, or if you're someone with like cerebral palsy, or someone who has something that things are going to kind of stay the same through most of your life.
Kind of like a brain injury.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, no, some things stay the same, but with a brain injury, I'm sure you guys have seen, there's some people, people get better, and then it might level off, and then it might go up and down. But there's some people who have had brain injuries who 10 years later, they've recovered so much that although they had a brain injury, they may no longer be considered disabled because they can think they can do things. And so the Social Security Administration has to double check every couple of years. And they want to make sure that when they're giving these benefits out, they want to ask Ken, okay, well, you formerly worked and then you had a brain injury. Let's see how you're doing now. What they're going to really see is, are you well enough to work?
Right. Because I do work now. Don't work a lot, but I do work.
Right.
And that's the main thing they wanted to know about.
They want to know how many hours have you worked?
Yep.
And they want to know, if you wanted to, could you be working more?
Right.
Because if you have the ability to work more, even though you're a person who had a brain injury, it may not mean you're disabled in the eyes of the Social Security Administration.
Right.
Because if you can work, they don't care about the label.
Right.
They want you to work.
Yeah, that was a big deal for me when I worked at the Region House.
Mm-hmm.
I was only allowed to make up to a certain amount.
Right.
And then, it was okay because I believe they said, like, for every $2 you make over that, you get one instead.
So once you reach a certain level, yes. When you work and you're on some of these benefits, you might lose some of your SSI or your Social Security disability for working, but you still, in the end, make out better. You still have more money because you're earning more money, so you have more money. But there is always a limit that you want to be careful of for something like that.
And one thing Jesse wanted to know about is he lives downstairs from his brother.
Okay.
And he wants to know if he can get some money for taking care of him.
They said no. And they said no. Wow, why is that? Why can't he? Well, I forget what it's called. It's called what's it
The
called?
CDPAP program.
Yeah.
So depending on, do you get aid service now, or do you have people who come into the house right now?
Not right now. I did, but right now it's just not feasible or doable because I don't need that amount of hours that they want, and for the amount of hours that I would need them for is not even worth the gas money for them to.
Right. So the CDPAP program is a program in New York State that it's called the Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. And this is a program when someone is on a form of Medicaid in the community that they can hire and fire their own people who are going to be providing assistance in the house. And so the rules do say that if you qualify for home care, you can hire family members.
Really? Well, that was like what they kind of said we couldn't do.
Nope.
The reason he wasn't getting the rate off or whatnot was because he was like brother.
No, siblings can definitely do that. But some of these CDPAP, the companies who manage them, occasionally get rules wrong, or they come up with their own rules. But there's a really important thing that the two of you should know right now, is that this program is, on today's date, it's under fire in New York State budget. So the governor is trying to make a drastic change to cut the budget on this CDPAP program, and they're trying to change it so there would only be one company managing the paperwork for it, this thing called a fiscal intermediary for the entire state.
Isn't that like a monopoly? Is that
Yeah, they're trying to create a monopoly. And they're trying to put all of the smaller companies out of business and give the contract to one. And I know right now there's people going to the governor's office, sending in letters, sending things to legislators saying, we do not want this to be a single fiscal intermediary because we think it's going to be a paperwork nightmare. Yep. Because if the 100,000 people using this, or however many are using it, all have to go through one company, that means all of their aides have to send their paperwork to one company who then has to process it and send it to Medicaid to all the different counties who will then eventually cut a paycheck back to the workers. And from what we've seen when they've tried to use one company for other parts of community Medicaid, like the assessment process and things, it's not gone well at all. So from an advocate's point of view, we really think this is potentially disastrous that they're trying to make this change. And I know that there are advocacy and disability organizations that are, like, again, this is coming up in the past 48 hours, the past 2 or 3 days, where this has become really urgent, that people are trying to really advocate for the governor and saying, you don't understand the impact this is going to have on people with disabilities and their families.
Is that why they're having such a problem with the budget this time around? Does that have a lot to do with it? Or?
They always have a budget, or they always have a problem with putting together the budget. But the truth is, one of the largest parts of the budget is Medicaid.
Yep.
And it's really kind of a hard thing for the state and counties to balance because there are so many people with disabilities who rely on this, who need this, and who genuinely have disabilities. And there are seniors who need this kind of home care to keep them out of nursing homes because if they can't live in their home safely, they need home care. Or they need to go to a nursing home to get care. Like there's so many people who really need this Medicaid services because they can't afford these services otherwise without Medicaid. But there is waste in the system and there is fraud in the system. And unfortunately, the governor and people are saying we'd rather, because there's some fraud, we'd rather cut, a lot of it out, but they're not looking at the impact on the people who really need this.
Right.
And so it's a really tough situation right now.
Does this have anything to do with the transportation issue that we deal with?
I think that's something completely different. I really do, yes.
But it's all under Medicare, isn't it?
Well, again, it is a little bit, but they're not allowing trips for, say, 50 miles away. They're keeping it very local now. If I wanted to go to see a friend that lives in Rensselaer, I'm not allowed to do that anymore.
It is a way of cutting back on the budget for Medicaid. And I have a client who's a senior who, with their insurance and things, it was being affected too because she lives in one county in New York. Her primary physician lives 2 counties away, and they're no longer paying for that transportation for her to go see her primary physician. So it's all a matter of trying to reduce the Medicaid budget.
I can understand that to a certain extent. I really can.
I imagine as someone who's a fiscal conservative, you can understand
right,
trying
yeah.
to do that.
What do you call me? My favorite Republican.
Can you, thinking back to the legal guardianship things, could you speak to the difference between temporary versus permanent guardianship? And the reason I ask is because a lot of individuals that I spend time with, I believe at some point early in their injury, their parents or spouse or whomever is granted temporary guardianship for the immediate aftermath of the injury. And then as the person regains cognitive abilities, more independence, they just kind of maintain that. And the person with the disability thinks that they still are under this legal guardianship, and no one's really working to change that perception, whether on purpose or or they don't know either, and it's become problematic. Can you talk about that at all?
Sure. And I think and I hope that that's going to change going forward, because there's definitely been some changes in the attitudes of the judges. With guardianships, they didn't like doing these temporary ones because they were always fearful that if something was short term, someone would have to come back and get more powers. And again, there's a couple different guardianship programs in New York, but if we're looking at the one that most folks with traumatic brain injury are in, it's this guardianship called an Article 81. And it's supposed to be specifically tailored to the needs of the individual. And it was supposed to be set up so that when you go in, the guardian gets the authority to do the things that the person with the brain injury is not able to do, but he or she should have been able to retain certain rights and control over things that they could do. And it was supposed to be easily amended or changed, that as someone got better and needed less services, as someone like brain injury, sort of diminished and their abilities increased, you should have been able to go back to the court and say, I'd like to petition for a change in this and reduce the authority of the guardian and give me more rights. And so the law was set up that way, but it never really initially materialized because, one, the person with the brain injury didn't realize they had the right to go back to make that change. Their parents or whoever is the guardian, I mean, you've lived through this. Parents can get very protective and say, I just need to keep my arms around you for a little bit longer. And they're sort of afraid to let go once they've got that. And the judges also are scared to kind of see the control go because they are afraid that someone's just going to have to come back and put that stuff in place. So there's a lot of things in play here. But I can definitely hear from going to conferences that judges are looking at this in a different way. And they are for young adults on the autism spectrum or with a developmental disability who are getting a guardianship at 18, or people in the early stages of a brain injury. They're more likely now to actually say, let's put a guardianship in place for 3 years, for 5 years, and then reevaluate it after that amount of time. And I think attorneys need to know that when we're helping people with these guardianships, that it's in the best interest of the people that we're really supposed to be representing, the individuals with disabilities, to try to advocate to get these things to be not permanent, but say, let's put a time limit on this. Let's have this be a temporary guardianship to last a certain amount of time. Maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's, depending on the situation. And let's reevaluate then and see what kind of assistance the individual might need.
Kind of like a recertification type of thing?
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And there are judges being more progressive and allowing that when they're starting things off. So if someone didn't have that initially, again, if in New York you're under this Article 81, the guardians have to file a report every year. An accounting, as we were talking about with the money, and a report about how is somebody doing? What services are they getting? Are there any changes in their life? And the guardian is supposed to report back, well, they might not need as many services as they used to, but it's not always getting back to the judge. So this might be a situation where an individual with a disability needs to advocate for him or herself or themselves. They might need to work with other professionals and say, can you help me have a conversation with my guardian? I would really like to be able to do more for myself. And so if it's not something they're comfortable doing, talking to the other professionals around them in their lives, I think that can help have a conversation. Or they can say, my parents aren't listening and I don't need this. Can you help me find someone who can help reduce the guardianship?
Right.
In New York, they can always go through like the New York State Bar Association. They can maybe try legal aid. There's other disability advocacy groups out there. And in other states, it's probably the same way. Look for disability advocacy groups, look for independent living centers, or go to the state bar to see if there's people who can do pro bono work to help reduce a guardianship.
So say that you do get off a couple of the programs that you don't need anymore.
Mm-hmm.
How hard is it to get back onto it if you do need it further down the road?
Yeah.
If it's a guardianship, then it's just another petition back to the court saying something's happened. There's been a relapse.
Okay.
There's other things going on, and we need to add more oomph or more authority back to the guardian. For some other programs, like if someone needs to leave Medicaid, Social Security, or some of these other, if they no longer need some services through the TBI waiver, but they do down the road, then you just do a new petition or a new application.
Sometimes I wonder if there should be a new, what I call that, a category for people with brain injuries. Because it seems to me that you got to go every year and tell them why you're not in a nursing home. Is that basically how that works?
Yeah, and it's also like you gotta reclaim that you still have a brain injury, like as if you're one day not gonna have it,
Well, I think one hard thing that folks with brain injuries face is you don't look disabled.
Right.
And that in and of itself actually makes it harder for like the public or the doctors or the government agencies. Who are like, well, you don't act like a person with a disability. You're walking fine, you're talking fine. And it was like, yeah, but you're not seeing all of the ways that it's actually affecting me. And to your point, Ken, where, there's all these different, that term brain, I have a brain injury, for some people means I've got someone now who's never going to get out of, she fell on vacation, she bunked her head, she is never going to walk again, she's really not getting out of her nursing home bed, and she really is not able to speak any longer because of how it affected her brain and because of her age when it hit. But then there's other people, when you're younger, your brain can regrow whatever it regrows. That's not my area. I just know that things get better. And so for some people, they have a brain injury, but they don't experience the same symptoms that they used to. And the state doesn't have a good way of knowing one way or the other, are you still like you used to be, or are you different now? And the sort of that full range of what it means to be a person with again, that name, that diagnosis, traumatic brain injury, doesn't give or shouldn't give anyone a clue by itself as to someone's abilities or inabilities.
Right.
Because it's really such a range.
Yeah.
That's why I was always wondering if there should be a different category for people with brain injuries.
Like almost having be a tiered system.
Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Like almost like brain injury 1, 2, or 3, and depending on where you are in terms of skills and abilities, and the level of care that you need, you sort of fall into one of these other things.
Maybe somewhere down the road they'll do that, but it's nothing in the near future, I don't think.
The other thing that might happen is you might have gotten a lot better, but then people with brain injury, they age just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think it's still not clear about how the aging process, is the brain injury going to speed up the aging process? So are things like dementia, inability, balance, that kind of stuff, is that going to be affected earlier? And so again, it might be you went up in terms of skills, and at some point some people might go back down again.
Right.
And also, it's what we see often is that people, even with more severe injury, can be really successful out in the community with maximum supports.
Oh,
and
yeah.
then they say, oh, wow, you're doing really well. We should reduce some of these supports. And then they of course, regress or
All right. And they're doing better because of the supports.
Because of the support. So
Yes.
let's keep the supports and just keep changing the goals, right?
Right.
But that makes too much sense.
Right. So as this whole up and down plays into the guardianship, there are ways in New York to change it, but someone needs to know. They have a right to get it changed. And so sometimes that just means they have to talk with the professionals in their lives who can help them get to a place where someone might be able to help them change it.
Well, why am I allowed more money in my trust now? Hasn't that changed a little bit? Maybe not in the trust, but they allow me to have a little more money than I used to.
Okay, that actually has to do with how Medicaid rules changed in New York State.
Okay.
So New York happens to be one of the most generous states in the country, believe it or not, for allowing people who are on Medicaid to keep income and assets. And so when I first started working in this field, someone who was on Medicaid could only have a couple of $1,000s. And that's creeped up and creeped up and creeped up.
Right.
And in the past couple of years, it's really jumped. So now in New York, you can have a little more than $31,000 and be on Medicaid. What hasn't changed since I've been practicing for 20 some odd years is the amount of money you can have in your bank account if you're on SSI or supplemental security income. When I started practicing, that was $2,000.
Yes.
And how much is it now?
$2,000.
Right.
So that hasn't changed at all. So when we're saying two people who are sitting at a table who are both people with brain injuries, who are both on Medicaid, may be allowed two completely different asset limits depending on whether you are getting Social Security disability, which doesn't care about how much is in the bank, so you're just dealing with Medicaid, or if you are on SSI, supplemental security income, in which case you're stuck at the $2,000 level.
And that's something that scared me to death when I heard about it before I knew about the trust and all that. But being only allowed to have $2,000 in your bank account is really limiting you.
Absolutely.
And it's like you kind of dependent on it. You don't have any. You know what I'm trying to say.
Right. Well, not only that, but the amount that you get on SSI is still not gone up that much in 20 years.
Right.
So food is tripled, quadrupled. Rent has gone up. Like everything is so much more expensive. So what $2,000 gets you now compared to 25 years ago is like nothing.
Yep.
And so that's a go yell at the federal government for that. So that's the same pain point across the country with SSI. There is that in New York State, that big difference that if you became disabled or have a brain injury after you've worked and you can get Social Security disability, then you're under different rules. Or if you had a brain injury before the age of 22 and your parents are now retired or have passed on, you can then get Social Security under their record. So it's not fair that your personal situation that you had no control over when you got your injury really has a huge difference or a huge impact on how much money you're allowed to have in your own bank account.
Yeah.
Because someone with $32,000, $31,000 can live a much easier, a much more fulfilling life than someone who can only have $2,000, which is why these trusts are so important, these special needs trusts or these supplemental needs trusts, because if you can't have the money in your name, it can be in one of these trusts, and these trusts can then be used to supplement and pay for the things that you can't afford when you're stuck at $2,000. So these trusts are sort of the thing that levels the playing field. If you can't have the money in your pocket, at least someone else can manage it for you, and you have the opportunity to start to live a more fulfilling life.
So if you have a kid that just had a brain injury, what is the best way for them to start that really know nothing about it? What do they have to do first?
The first thing, if they have a brain injury?
Yep, when they get out of the hospital and don't know where to turn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in New York, I think there's a couple of different places. I mean, almost every state's going to have a brain injury association. So like the New York State Brain Injury Association is going to have a lot of information, and it's going to have a lot of contacts about services that are available in the community. But talking about these government benefits is something that's going to happen while someone is still in the hospital or still in rehab, because you're looking to get Medicaid to pay for, usually you have to get Medicaid to pay for the services, because most people can't pay off a $2.3 million hospital bill. And so even when you're at the hospital, that's when you're looking at getting Medicaid in place. And that's when you're going to start to look at and have your family look at, do you qualify for or will you qualify for Social Security disability or SSI? So those government benefits are something that starts to happen even before you get out of the hospital. Once you're out, the Brain Injury Association and in New York, there's something called the New York State Medicaid waiver. And that's a program that's going to help pay for some of the support services that can help you when you are trying to, go back to an apartment, go to a house, or even support you in still living in mom and dad's house.
Yeah. I think I am on the waiver. You are not.
Yes, I think I am too.
You are?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Most people who have a brain injury are on the waiver because it's going to offer you more specific services that you need than regular Medicaid would.
Right.
Including more speech. Well, actually, what kind of services do you guys get? I mean, those are all probably being paid for with the waiver.
Yeah,
For me, mostly it's transportation.
Okay.
Back and forth to doctor's appointments, things along that line. And even coming here as long as we do, that's part of it too.
Same for me. Even though it's getting cut drastically right now, but yeah, transportation is a big one for me. Also housing, like I get a subsidy on my housing, and I believe I get a subsidy on heating and oil and stuff like that. But
You probably do.
yeah, but
And that housing subsidy, if you were just a person who had MS, or if you were a person, depending on which program you have, if you have mental illness, you might not get that subsidy. That's a subsidy that is part of this specific brain injury waiver. So that's why, each state comes up with their own list of what benefits are we going to offer through programs that we've set up for people with brain injuries. So that's something that they went and said, okay, we're going to create a specific kind of Medicaid just for folks with brain injury. And we're going to offer, these specific kind of services. And it was a long time ago, but I was actually on the original committee to help plan the residential service component of the TBI waiver, which means I'm really old. That was before I went to law school.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm old.
well, youth can, so
Right.
it makes.
Now, does anybody else here have any questions before we wrap it up?
Did have one more question though.
Okay.
Ken, what happened to that boat?
I sold it.
Ugh.
I'd never be able to get in and out of it on my own anymore.
Oh boy.
But even if he wanted to have it, because of what was going on with his benefits, it based on the Medicaid rules at the time, having the boat would have disqualified him.
Right.
Owning the boat in his name would have disqualified him from being able to get on the TBI waiver.
Yep.
So even if people said, yeah, we don't want him captaining a boat, it was an asset that was going to be a problem with his benefits.
Right.
Sadly.
I remember it well.
We'll get you a kayak.
He brings the beer.
Thank you, Kim, for coming today and talking about the
The guardianships and those other government programs are really, really important for people with disabilities and TBI to live a really fulfilling life. And so it's an exciting area, and I'm happy to practice in it. And thank you so much for inviting me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to F It, I Have a Brain Injury. I'm Jesse, and this is Ken.
And I hope you all get something out of this podcast.
We would love to hear your stories too. See you next time.
See you next time.